Hey, this is Jillian Johnsrud. I'm so excited about this lesson because it's one of my favorite things to teach because it's so effective in helping people really get clarity about the things that bring meaning and enjoyment and fulfillment in their lives. So I call this one the superpower. And it's a very simple idea. Basic idea. This is our circle of capabilities. In here are all the things that we are capable of doing as people. This stuff over here are things that we're probably adequate at. We're not better than most people. We're not really worse than most people. We can do it. It takes a little bit more effort. It maybe takes a little bit more time, but we're definitely capable of doing those things. Here, this lovely little circle is our superpower. And way out here are things that we probably shouldn't do. It's not our skill set. We have no interest in it. We have no natural ability for this thing. We don't really know a lot about it, and it creates no flow. Sometimes this still ends up being part of our work. And the more time that we spend between these two, the more of our job consists of these two kinds of activities. Typically, it's really unfulfilling. It's really stressful and very not enjoyable. So what is our superpower? There are 4 different characteristics that I think are kind of contained in our superpower. And it might be all of these things. It might be one of these things. The first one is a deep knowledge. It's something that we know a lot about. It's something we're really familiar with. And this oftentimes comes because of the second one. It's something that we're passionate about. So oftentimes when we're passionate about something, we end up knowing a lot about it just because we're driven to learn more and to explore more and to figure more things out. The third one, it's our natural skill set. It's just something that we were always a little bit better at. And sometimes that natural skill set, I'm not saying you're like 100 times better than everyone else. I'm just saying right out of the gate, it was a little bit easier for you. Those are the things that maybe in school you put in less time and less effort, but you got just as good of grades as the kids who had to study a lot for that thing. Or you just picked it up a little bit easier. And it definitely starts as a seed, but it's something that if we allocate more time to our superpower, it grows exponentially compared to people who this thing is way out here for them. They could put in a ton of time and a ton of energy and never make half the progress that you can make because this is kind of just your natural skill set. And the last one is flow. It's that thing that when you do it, you get kind of caught up in it and you just, it just starts rolling along. You just gain more momentum. So these are our superpowers. And like I said, sometimes it's a combination thereof. It's something that we have a lot about, we know a lot about, we're passionate about. It creates flow. It's kind of our natural skill set. But what I like to have people do is list out all of the things that could qualify for your superpower. List out all the things that you're merely capable of. And list out all the things that you probably shouldn't do. And this can be really problematic, oftentimes in corporate settings, because what often happens in corporate settings, they say, hey, you're really good at that thing. Way to go. Like, we'll give you a raise. And you're like, thank you. I get to do the thing that I love and I earn more money. Yay. And then they're like, hey, you're really good at this thing. Maybe we'll have you do this thing over here. And you're like, oh, it's more money, but I don't actually get to do any of the things that are my superpower. Or your time gets split. Now you only get to do this half the time and you're doing this the other half the time. And then you get promoted again, heaven forbid. And now you're just doing this stuff that you don't really know that much about. You're not really passionate about, really wasn't your natural skill set. And instead of that flow, it's just kind of like pushing a rock up a hill. I think that ideally, sometimes we can look at where am I in my current job? And what would it look like? And this is really helpful when you're deciding, should I switch jobs? Like, is this is the job description, it's never going to be a good fit. Like, this stuff doesn't change a tremendous amount. It's also helpful when you're thinking about, like, should I get promoted? Should I switch companies? Should I become an entrepreneur? Should I go out on my own? I think ideally, and I don't know which one of those answers is right for you, but ideally, I think we're typically happy when we get to spend two things. 80% of our time gets to be in our superpower. Sometimes we have to do stuff we're just merely adequate at. We have to show up for meetings, we have to take notes, we have to send emails, send an invoice, like whatever that is. Every once in a while we have to do something like we probably should not be doing. But if 80% of our time we get to do this thing, we're typically pretty happy. And the second thing that I look at is, of all of your superpowers, how many of them go into your work? Because the more variety shows up in your work, that's the other factor that I think gives us a lot of meaning and fulfillment and enjoyment. And in the next lesson, we're going to really dive into that idea in a much deeper and different way. But I want you to start thinking about that. And one more thing I'll say about superpower is not all of them get caught in a career or a job. And when you have these deep knowledge and this passion, this skill set, and this flow, oftentimes that's where we find hobbies or we find interests. Like, these things need a place in our life for us to feel fulfilled and happy. So if you can't squeeze it into your job, oftentimes we look for other places to put it. Maybe you plan amazing vacations. Like, you have that natural skill set of organizing and coordinating and figuring out the flights and the itineraries and the hotels and doing the research, and you have the deep knowledge of where you're going, and you're passionate about it, and you love researching and learning and coming up with that perfect itinerary, and it creates so much flow. Like, when you're in that, like, that's so great. And all of those superpowers, you don't use it all in your job. And that's okay, but it has to have a place to go in your life, which is what we'll talk about more in the next lesson. So for now, I want you to think about, what are your superpowers? What are you merely adequate at? What should you probably not be doing? And look at your current work. And here's the thing, whether this is 9 to 5, whether this is self-employed, whether you do stuff on the side, whether this is volunteer work or a hobby. Because this stuff, I really believe it needs a place to go in our life. So even if you're like, I'm gonna retire, I'm never gonna earn another dollar in my life, I think if you find a place for some of these to go in a volunteer role, serving on the board of directors, in hobbies, then that's great. But it just has to go somewhere. So create those 3 lists and then really take a look at what your work looks like and what might be the next step to get you more in this zone. Best of luck, and I'm super excited for you to do the next lesson.